Thank you for joining me for another episode of Awake and Empowered TV. I'm your host, Ethann Fox. Today I have a 2-hour video clip from our 2018 Awake and Empowered Expo. We have a number of amazing presenters on stage taking questions from the audience on a variety of subjects, from breatharianism to crop circles to extraterrestrial contact, quite a variety of interesting topics. Before we get into that, I want to mention our next Awake and Empowered Expo is coming up August 2019. You can buy tickets at awakenempoweredexpo.com. So we look forward to seeing you there. We also have our kids day camp coming up this summer of 2019 as well. We'll be at the very end of June 2019. You can find tickets for that soon. We haven't posted them yet at seedoflifeschool.com or at weekendandwizardry.com. And we'll soon be launching also our new Conscious Youth website for the Conscious Youth program. So if your kids are interested in that, in the meantime, they can go to Flower of Life /Conscious Youth on Facebook and sign up for our online education program, which is completely free for the kids to join if they'd like. Join us for those and lots of other exciting things and exciting shows coming up in the near future. So without any further delay, here's our video from our 2018 Awake and Empowered Expo. We're going to be starting the consciousness panel, and this is for you guys to ask any questions of any of us or all of us. And we have a couple of hours. We'll run a little bit late since we started a little bit late. But if that's okay with you guys, or if you have to leave early, that's all right. There's a microphone in the center of the room, so please step up there if you have any questions.
Just have probably a general question to everybody here in the panel.
Can you speak a little closer to the mic, please?
What's your kind of feel on how things are picking up and the momentum in society and how people are gravitating towards this? I know my impression is that I think we are seeing a shift, but I guess from your clients and your coaching and that, I mean, I think you would have a much better feel for who's being pulled in and how people are changing, and that if you can just maybe touch on that a bit, please.
Well, there's no question, and I work with clients all week long, and I can tell you it's happening. I was just talking to a young girl who was here at the expo all weekend long. She was in college for a very traditional degree, and she came to me for a session a few months back, and she was considering dropping out of college because she's channeling. And she's bringing through such profound messages that the college degree that she's going for is losing its relevance day by day. And it's really a common theme. You can apply that to so many different people in so many different professions. But it's not just that. I think that there are a lot of people right now who are in the midst of, for those of you who follow my channeling, this grid shift, which is essentially moving from our old programs and ideas and beliefs about ourselves, which have been very limited, to expanding our minds to the opportunities. But what I notice is a lot of people are getting stuck around the idea of how to do it. Because we're so focused in physical, and we're so used to being focused in physical, that we see only one path for success or happiness. And usually that involves some business route or some financial route of some kind. And what's interesting about this is the guides have alluded to this new grid that has been stabilized on the planet. So the old grid is really just a pattern, a sacred geometric pattern of information that vibrates in a lower speed. It's third dimensional. This new grid is a bridge back to the pattern of God, which is really multidimensional, heaven on earth. And it is void of time, void of measurement, void of amount of time for amount of work for amount of payback. And that's a hard concept for us to get. It really relies on us being in these shoes, who we authentically are. But that's the one thing I see people questioning. And they're coming to me to say, my idea of who I was is now changing, but I don't know who that new person is. So I think that's evident of many things that are taking place on the planet right now, vibrationally, as well as the way we're all affecting each other.
Anyone else?
Being from the entertainment industry, in the video game industry and comic book as well, what I've really been starting to notice is that there's mainstream entertainment that's shifting in this way. There are 3 or 4 different new TV shows that are coming out, including a hospital show called New Amsterdam. That's about, they fire all the doctors because the doctors are just trying to make money off of their patients, and they're rehiring new doctors to actually heal people. And so we're seeing more and more things like that. And when I see it in the mass market and the mass media, then I really get excited about where we're heading.
I do a lot of traveling around the world. I actually have 3 passports. They're all legal, by the way. I don't know how I ended up with 3 passports, but that's where it is. The one thing that excites me the most is looking at my mailing list. I know everyone by name. No, I'm just joking. The people you often ask me, where is your biggest sort of concentration of fans? I said, I have no idea. And I think probably California. I said, probably. And I took a look at my list one day, just for fun, because someone brought it up. And I discovered that most of my fans around the world are in Ohio. Right, exactly. So conservative, Ohio, quiet Midwestern little place. And I've been to towns in Ohio that you wouldn't even know where they exist on Google Earth. People come out of the woodwork. We fill entire rooms. Hopefully it's because of me, I don't know. But it's encouraging to see that there are people like us in the middle of small places, in the middle of nowhere. Even in Salt Lake City, someone sent me an email and they said, you're going to be in California. Do you mind doing a quick sort of stop in Salt Lake City? And I thought, I've always wanted to go to Salt Lake City. I go anywhere where I haven't been. And they said, well, no one ever comes here to talk about any esoteric stuff. I thought, well, if I leave with the bank balance in the black, I am there. And sure enough, we packed so many people in the room, we had to actually cancel the gig and actually hire a main auditorium at the main college in Salt Lake City. It was packed. And that's why I find it encouraging that people like us, we don't make the headline news because it's good news. I worked in advertising for many, many years. I got kicked out of it by having a conscience. I knew then I was doing the wrong living. But I did find out that, it's not because there's some nefarious purpose, unless you're watching Fox propaganda. It really is. It's the fact that good news doesn't sell and doesn't get put in the media because it really is just not an attractor. People are drawn to drama. If you put drama on the front page of the newspapers, then it sells newspapers because they have to pay for the advertising. It's basically an economy of numbers. It's not because of some nefarious reason. So we are actually having much more impact behind the scenes. It's like everybody that's doing all this work is keeping a very low profile. And that's what's encouraging. And one of the things that suddenly hit me was a piece of channeled information. Years ago, some of my closest friends are some of the world's best trance mediums. They even help the police with their work. And one of the things that I remember the spirit world saying through this lady was that don't be too concerned about, are we going to make it? Are we not going to make it? The fact is, the human race is actually so close to hitting a switch, you probably would be amazed how quickly it's going to happen. Because it's all happening behind the scenes. We're not making visual waves. Unless, like you said in the media, sometimes a film comes out that has the right spiritual content. It is happening, but there's so much happening behind the scenes, and that's really encouraging. So don't lose heart. Just it's like Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see. Grow your own garden in the way you want it, and one of your neighbors will go, hey, he's got a good idea. They'll imitate you. The other guy will say, I hate that. I'm going to do something else. That's cool. But the point is that the more people that you become a mirror to, the more that they'll imitate you. That's how the change occurs. So that the picture is actually much rosier than you think.
Well, I should say, from my experience anyway, a couple of perspectives. One, in these contexts, we're often talking about disclosure and when's disclosure going to come. And I think a lot of people are looking in the wrong places for disclosure to come. because disclosure is happening right here. All these individuals doing the research that they're doing and having very big followings individually and collectively, and reaching the population of people who are awake and interested in those things. It's coming through channeled works. It's coming through individuals like Freddy and Billy doing research into these fields and releasing that information. A lot of governments are starting to become more free with that information as well. So we're starting to see disclosure occurring. Another thing I notice is, well, a lot of my clients that I work with, even a lot of the individuals that I work with as light workers, they're, geneticists and people from the field of biology, and we have Ronald over here who was a dentist, recovering dentist, right? Somebody I spoke with a couple of months ago who is a hedge fund manager, makes almost $1 million a year, who's quitting his job, selling his company to do something more spiritually based. Last expo, we had a Hollywood producer here who had a spiritual awakening 6 months prior to that, and didn't, suddenly found herself without a spiritual family and came here to find one. So it's happening everywhere. And if it's happening with individuals like that, it must be happening on all levels of society and governments. We just don't know about it because those people are not out there telling everybody that they had this awakening, because they don't feel comfortable doing that. So it is occurring everywhere and to everyone. As Aaron was speaking earlier this weekend about all the movement in the whole financial system and blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, so there is this huge movement occurring even in the financial system. A lot of people are talking about how the financial system is changing, but on a practical level, it really is changing. So there's definitely a movement toward a huge awakening in consciousness. And I agree with Billy from the astrological standpoint that the age of Aquarius is really going to start in the mid-2020s and beyond. So we're just at the early stage of that movement. So you'll see it in the next 10 years really start to pick up momentum.
So from this very local perspective, really, I've really seen a shift in the pattern of who I'm working with. My clients at first were very, very isolated. They would be alone in their room and going through this transformation and refusing to tell anyone in the world about it. And they'd come and have sessions. And now these people are going back and talking about it. And I'm seeing clusters instead of individuals now. And so I see really that all of you are really making impacts, and you're not individuals anymore. You're clusters all over the place. So.
Something very interesting that I've seen happening with social media, where you can spread, the whole conscious awakening through that. I started off with a social media page specifically for conspiracies and conscious information and ancient history. And then I gradually would just drop a little bit on my personal Facebook page. Not a lot, just a little something here and there. And then I would see what the response would be. And first it was like, no likes. I mean, some people even complained to make the post get deleted by Facebook, and they would delete my post sometimes saying I was a danger to the community. That was the actual message that they will send you. And then sometimes they'll suspend you for 3 weeks as well. So I've been through that. But I didn't give up. I would gradually drop a little something on, until it started picking up a little bit of steam. And some people who were totally not even close to being into this kind of stuff started clicking the like button and not only sharing it. Now, over the last 4 years, I've seen people go from not liking anything on there to now I can post something almost every 3 or 4 hours, and it would get not only liked but also shared by people who were totally against all this information at the very beginning. So you can see the spread of the consciousness. This is what it means to be immortal. It's sharing your conscious mind with another conscious mind, and it keeps on going, and it can go on through eternity. As long as somebody's remembering you or listening or reading your information, it's making you literally immortal. And that's what Thoth talks about in the Animal Tablet. So by dropping little seeds, never underestimate the power of dropping a seed. By dropping little seeds, I've seen the expansion of consciousness just through social media on pages that I have that the people were not very conscious whatsoever. So it's working little by little. We just have to have patience.
So I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is that you think of, see, everybody here, we've all drinking the Kool-Aid. We're all in the process of awakening, and we talk about this stuff, and we just figure everybody in the world talks like this, right? What is exciting for me is I'm seeing traditional mainstream expressions like the medical industry, media, things that are being really challenged really in the mainstream, where the everyday Joe who hasn't started this journey is like going, you know, maybe I'm not getting the truth on CNN or Fox News or whatever, and we're seeing these established pieces that have been in place that have been non-challenged for so long, and they're actually now starting to be they're being challenged by the mainstream, by people who haven't really begun this journey. And that to me is very exciting, because I think there's a whole shift that needs to take place with the people outside of this room that are at home right now watching football or whatever, and thinking they're getting a dose of reality or what really makes sense in life. So that to me is very exciting, where you see the mainstream starting to push back against news, political systems, medical systems, and things that ultimately need to be transformed and changed as we move forward.
Yeah, I'll add one more quick thing. The biggest test for me is family dinners, because I've noticed the last time I was together for a family birthday dinner, the conversations were cryptocurrency, 9/11 conspiracy, and I wasn't saying a word, but I was turning my head like, where did that come from? So that's my big test. And I'm seeing it in my own family, which is crazy, because I've learned not to push that, it doesn't go well. And backing off, it's evolved in its own way. So
I have two questions. The first one's about blood types, especially particularly Rh negative and O negative blood types. If they have all come from the same place, and if there's share a similar purpose or path. And also, I've heard that the O negative or Rh negatives, especially people born in like the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, are like particularly blocked. And so I was just wondering about that. And I also have a question, or if anyone could comment on the twin flame experiment. And I've heard that there's an accelerated time in the next 2 years where twin flames are coming together, and all twin flames will be in union.
It's so amazing that you mentioned Twin Flame, because that's one of my new songs. Twin Flame by Forbidden Knowledge, available on iTunes. No, I'm just shameless plug. I'm sorry, but anyway, twin flames are very unique because it's almost like a yin and a yang. They're the same, but at the same time they're polar opposites. It's a very unique type of a scenario when you're talking, at least in a relationship. Fortunately for me, I feel like I have found my twin flame, which is why I made the song Twin Flame. So it's been an amazing experience. The twin flame experiment itself, I'm not too familiar with the experiment, just some of the metaphysical information that goes along with being a twin flame, which is where you can be with a person that is literally, like I'm a Virgo, so I'm very organized, I'm very firm. When something is moved, I like to put it back in the same spot where it is, things like that. And I'm not that fiery. I'm not a fiery individual. She's like an Aries, and she's more fiery and more outgoing and everything else. So where I lack in consciously in being more outgoing and being more interactive with people and being out there more, kind of, if you want to call it having fun or whatever, she pulls me up to that level. And then where she lacks in being more organized and more stable, I pull her down to that level. So we kind of have this thing where we kind of balance each other out. So that's kind of why I wrote the song. But the experiment itself, I'm not too familiar with the experiment. If anybody here is familiar with the experiment aspect of it, I'm not familiar with that. But that's what I came up with about it, just researching it.
Hi. I don't know about the twin flames, but I do know about the blood types in terms of extraterrestrial experiencers. One of the things I talked about today in my talk was a very long study over 5 years that was done with the Free Foundation. I don't know if you're familiar with it, looking into extraordinary extraterrestrial experiencers. And they interviewed 4,000 people worldwide in 100 countries and looked at different aspects of contact and what that meant for those people. It was very scientifically designed. I don't know if you know the work of Kenneth Ring. He did the Omega Project. If you're into near-death experience, he designed a survey around how near-death experiencers are similar to extraterrestrial experiencers. He's a former faculty at University of Connecticut in psychology. He did a beautiful study on that. It's still so relevant when you read it. So the Free people took Kenneth Ring's work and did it today. 5 years ago, they began the survey. They had it all through the internet, and they've just recently published a book on their findings. I swear it's this big. It's probably going to be the college textbook for extraterrestrial experiencers. They asked me to contribute to it to do an exoconscious analysis of the material that came forth in that survey, and it was really one of the most moving and remarkable experiences in my professional life to have that information from those over 4,000 experiencers. One of the things they did find was that blood type was irrelevant. Oh, shucks. But there is a big movement, especially if you look at Tom DeLonge's group, To the Stars Academy. That group's really pushing hard to look at, what are the DNA markers, what are the blood type markers, what's the genetic makeup of experiencers. And I'm not sure why they're doing it, except that I know that all the people that are in their experiments are mostly military people. So I don't know if they're doing it for military reasons or or they're trying to push out information into the general population about ET experiencers. I work as a mind-body therapist in Phoenix, Arizona. I work with an alternative physician who is actually an allopathic physician, but also just does alternative medicine at this point. So I work with the emotional needs of his patients. And we do a lot of DNA research on our patients. Many of them, he's the doctor of last resort that you go to when you have an incurable situation that nothing else is touching. And so we see a lot of DNA. So we see a lot of DNA as a therapist. I see a lot of DNA that's been changed over time with childhood abuse that people have had to deal with. Literally changes your DNA. So now there are DNA markers that they're finding about trauma in early childhood and how it affects your DNA. And what we see is that as people heal, their DNA actually changes again. So to try to take an experiencer and say, oh, here's your DNA marker, that's just not going to work. DNA is very, it's very malleable. I'm just going to say that. What I've seen in my work, it's very malleable. Things change. When your consciousness changes, it definitely does change your DNA, and we found that out to be. I don't know where the blood type came from, but I guess it's been kind of discounted now with the free research. So,
from the perspective of ability to heal or what you're manifesting based on your blood type, I know there's a lot of information about eating for different blood type. I think the information I've gotten intuitively during my experience working with people is that the blood type has more to do with your origins, where you came from genetically, as opposed to, and which you may have magnetized upon incarnation to give you a propensity into a particular direction. Rh negative maybe might cause some issues, what we know, one with childbirth, right? It can cause issues. But it's not as if a particular blood type
predispositions you to not being able to heal or to being more stubborn or to not getting it right. It's just, genetically speaking, it's more about where you're from, where you originate genetically, and then incarnationally speaking, it's probably what you're magnetizing in order to bring you into recognition of things that you're here to release, if that makes sense.
I can touch on the twin flames. I have done some channeling on blood types, and it would be on YouTube, but I can't recall what it was all about. But what I will say is whenever the guys are asked a question like that, what does the RH blood type mean? They'll never give a hard and fast rule for everybody. They'll usually say that because we're vibrational beings, just like the conversation around the DNA, we're always changing. And so there's never any hard and fast rule. But the twin flame, and I don't know about the experiment that you're talking about, but it does make sense to me, and I see this in a lot of my session work, that we're moving more towards a twin flame type of relationship. And so the reason for that is we've been operating in a new perspective. So if you follow some of my channeling on YouTube, the guys will talk about these 3 perspectives we operate in. There's a soul container, which is our singular experience. We have a higher self perspective, which is our planetary or collective energy. And we have an oversoul perspective, which is our cosmic connections. And naturally, as humans right now on the planet, we're gravitating more into those higher self and oversoul containers. So when we filter relationships through those containers, they're going to look a little bit different. These twin flame relationships, they come in not just to serve some type of a soul evolution or criteria, but they come in to support our intention here, our purpose, our assignment. They usually meet us because they were with us somewhere else in the cosmic universe, and there's something that we've done together through time that we're here to support in each other. And when you think about it, it's really inherent of the grid shift, because what I notice is a lot of us formed a relationship in that 3D matrix, and it was based on ideas about ourselves that really weren't true, or societal programming that told us who we had to be with and how that had to look. And now we're questioning all of those ideas in this awakening, gravitating more toward these higher self over soul containers, which means we're drawing these new partners. So it makes sense to me, and I'm seeing it more and more. And it's not just romantic relationships. We have Pleiadian, Arcturian, Andromedan, sisters, brothers, collectives meeting each other. And I've seen this lately in a lot of my sessions, where people are forming partnerships with other people and walking into those partnerships really quickly.
Yeah, and leading into that about how we need each other and everyone can help each other, getting back to a question I asked one of the presenters on Friday about a controversial subject. Well, first of all, to what extent are we able to ask our ET brethren and angels and guides and such to help us speed up the awakening in places where they may be a little reluctant to wake us up? This all ties into the issue that I brought up on Friday about how Ted Marr held a conference in 2016, June 2016, where a couple presenters pointed out that there are plans to have Edward Snowden and his colleagues expose documents which would, for all intents and purposes, show the 9/11 truth movement was right all along. And yet here we are over 2 years later and he still hasn't released them. When I asked Ted Marr at the Conscious Life Expo what the holdup was, he was reluctant to tell me, and he eventually gave in because all the audience members wanted to know. And he said that it's because the powers that be have made threats loud and clear that if Snowden were to expose those documents, lots of innocent people will die. The issue with this is that I've heard from sources that our ET brethren have the ability to shut down the powers that be pulling a doomsday switch. And not only that, they have the ability to help individual people. In fact, some of you who may be wondering why Winston Shrout isn't in jail yet for all his tax evasion things that he's in trouble with. Well, the word on the street is a lot of ETs and such are praying for him to make sure he doesn't go to jail because they see his sovereign citizen advice is very useful, and makes you wonder, well, couldn't our ET brethren do the same thing to prevent the powers that be from murdering people and make it easier for people like Snowden to expose these documents and speed up our awakening? Well, they do, but this kind of leads me to believe, is it possible the reason they're not doing that is because they think we're not ready yet because, well, for whatever the reason, we're not ready yet. So how do we get our AT brethren to help us with this?
Well, I'll take that from my perspective because I think it's a really important issue. And I do not believe, I agree with you that our ET brothers and sisters could change our reality in a heartbeat. I think they know how to do it. They could reveal it all. And it's not that they don't think that we deserve it. It's that they respect our free will. Because we as physical humans see in very narrow pathways of time. So if they were to go in, and let's just take the Snowden example, if they were to go in and they're going to say, we're going to change the Snowden situation so that everyone gets to see and is revealed what must be revealed, what we don't see in physical is that that timeline connects to so many other things, souls that have contracts and experiences to have, things in our collective, that if they change that one thing, there are so many other aspects of our reality that must change as well, that we don't even understand are related. So for them to come in and change our reality is stepping on the free will of every sovereign being in this situation. So they honor us that much that they wouldn't do that. But what I believe that they do is they assist us non-physically. So when we have these big upgrades come and these big planetary alignments come where we're feeling the shift in the energy and everyone's posting online, I'm feeling the buzz, right? It's an opportunity. I believe that they can assist us, especially they will at certain times when the planet is aligned, to activate us. But it's not an end-all, be-all to change the reality. It's an opportunity for us to become more conscious so we change it ourselves, because that's ultimately what they want for us. And they're not perfect. These ET collectives and communities, they're really quick to say, we don't have all the answers. We are still in the process, some of us, of evolving in areas that maybe humans have already evolved in. So we kind of get this picture in our mind that these ETs are, the end-all, be-all, mighty, savior, when really a lot of them are just like us with different structures, different history, different perspectives, going through their own stuff. But they're very happy to help us from a non-physical standpoint, but they will not tread on our free will.
Who's a Star Trek fan? Come on, cough it up. Come on, don't be shy. What's the most important thing about Star Trek, apart from Patrick Stewart, of course? The most important thing is the Prime Directive, right? Do you know where that comes from? Gene Roddenberry used to attend a group, a trance medium called Phyllis Schlemmer many years ago. He attended under a pseudonym, and there is a book on it. I think it's called I've lost the name of it. It'll come to me. And basically, if you look at the guy who is Gene Roddenberry, the producer of Star Trek, and look at the questions he's asking of Phyllis Schlemmer under trance, he's been given the information that became the blueprint for all the scripts of Star Trek, especially the second generation, which is the most defined of all the Star Trek programs. It is filled with universal knowledge, and the Prime Directive, by any other name, is called the Law of Non-Intervention. And it basically says that there's no other system in the galaxy that can intervene in the direction of evolvement of another species. They can aid. I mean, for example, if a planet cries out for help, they can certainly assist in a least possible way that makes them visible. But the ability of self-determination is everything for the people that are on the planet. I've come personally across this because of my work with crop circles, because we got exactly the same information from the source of the circle makers. They said, your planet was crying out for help. People were crying out for help. You need a little bit of a nudge forward because you're reaching a point in time where you have a window of opportunity to evolve. And 2012 was just part of the midpoint of the window. I think we touched on this earlier. It was a big joke. There's a big industry around the end of the planet. 2012 was the midpoint for that window. It's beginning to close now, but 30 years either side of that window, we have an opportunity to hit critical mass, and we're pretty close, as I said earlier. And the crop circles, essentially, what the circle makers were saying is that there is information that's being imprinted onto Earth's grid, which we can prove, and I did prove in the first book, that is here to awaken people. The symbols are full of information which act to bypass this problematic area called the brain, where your ego resides. They bypass the brain, they go straight into the DNA, which is why so many people say, I really like the crop circles. I have no idea what they mean, but I really like looking at them. Yeah, because it's bypassed this problematic area of the head, and it's going straight to the heart of who you really are, which means, A, a lot of people either love the crop circles, or two, they find them to be the source of the devil. I mean, it's a real black and white study in this subject. I've learned more about the human race studying about crop circles than any other subject on Earth. I've seen the polarization that it creates, because the people that don't like the crop circles, it's basically showing up a mirror, and they don't like what they see, and they're going to basically push back. But the people that do feel attracted to it, you can see their lives changing. And the other thing that they were saying about the designs is that some of them are not meant for you. They're meant for the Earth. There's information being imprinted into the grid, information which of a technological nature that some of your scientists are going to look at, and it's going to put ideas into their heads, okay? And we thought, how are we going to prove this? Well, when I got around to publishing my book, we had a choice of front covers. And I went, I have to have this picture on the front cover because I know the information behind it. Very cunning. Basically, the picture on the front cover of the book was this massive tetrahedron design, which literally shifted the whole course of the phenomenon overnight across the world. This is what gave us Doug and Dave. Okay, that one design is what brought out Doug and Dave. They were created by the military, by MI6 in Britain, as an antidote to millions of people saying, hey, there's something magic happening across the face of the earth. So there's a knee-jerk reaction. But what they were saying is, this is part and parcel of the awakening. These little things that happen to put obstacles in your way are part of the awakening process. And the information that we're encoding in the designs will be given to scientists to develop new forms of propulsion. So that picture on the cover ends up going into the heads of 3 different scientists in America, in Britain, and in Australia. They've built that design as a 3D model, and it defies gravity. It's an anti-gravity device. We got that from channeled material 20 years before the damn thing appeared in England. So everything is where it should be. This is their way of going back to the story of the prime directive and the law of non-intervention. This is their way of saying, we are only here to assist. We can't intervene directly because it's not our will to do that. We can't intervene in your natural development. You are the ones you've been waiting for. You have to do it for yourself. We're just going to nudge you along, put the idea into your heads, and let you do things your way. We just hope it ends up being the good thing, because what we do down here, it echoes in reality. There are repercussions, and the other physical worlds and the non-physical worlds are also waiting for us to move forward, because what we do down here is going to affect them in the end. So they're very concerned about what's happening here. But again, we're here, we're incarnated for a reason. We have to follow the process through. The thing is, we are getting help. We're getting help from crop circles. We get help from spirit guides. We have information put into us into our dream state. We just have to act upon it. And as I said earlier, there's more of us doing this behind the scenes than meets the eye. So don't lose faith, because we are very, very close to hitting a switch.
Just real quickly, one of the things we found at the Institute of Exoconsciousness, because we concentrate on the innate human ability to connect, communicate, and actually co-create with extraterrestrials. So when we shifted this whole idea into co-creation with extraterrestrials, so extraterrestrial experiencers co-creating with extraterrestrials and non-dimensionals, or as Free calls it, non-human intelligences, whatever you want to call it. that what we're finding in the Institute is that there are actually healers coming forth who we work with, who are part of our community, that are working with extraterrestrial races. So I don't know if this is a change in the Prime Directive, but what they're doing is they're actually working with extraterrestrial races to help individuals within those races, not the whole race, but helping individuals, so sovereign individuals within those races who want to change their timeline, who want to heal part of their races and change their timeline. And there are people in our institute who are doing that, who are working directly with extraterrestrials, who are reaching out for help just like we humans reach out to them. So this is really a huge shift in what's happening with the human-ET relationship. It's more now of a peer-to-peer, collaborative, co-creative process of sovereign individuals of different races who can literally, with their consciousness, just like we do with our consciousness, they can change their timeline. They can change their timeline. They can change the information that they access. They can reach out to other races, maybe that they haven't reached out to before. So it's a very, very dynamic time right now when you take the time to look at what people are opening up. I think that I've been in the extraterrestrial field for well over 20 years now as a professional, and I just want to say that this is the most dynamic time I've ever lived through, that in terms of human empowerment, this is a time when humans can step up with their consciousness and work directly with extraterrestrials to create what we call an exoconscious civilization that's going to be very different than where we're living today.
Oh, quick thing while you're saying that. Is there any physicists here? My God, we have a deficiency of physicists. If a physicist were to be in this room right now, they would probably agree with what I'm about to say. There are only two actions going on in the universe. There's chaos and there's order. And in order to go from one level of order to another level of order, you have to go through chaos. But the greater the amount of chaos, the greater the potential jump to a greater potential of order. So if we're actually witnessing a lot of chaos right now, the potential for a greater level of order is now already in the works. So the level of chaos is seeding the very foundation of a new level of order. I find that actually very encouraging, coming from the scientific point of view.
Hey. I know this question will not be really related to this panel, but did someone of you did intensive research into physical silver? And will there maybe be substitutes in the future, or will we access it from other planets? Or will it be the most valuable resource on this planet very soon?
Can you repeat the question a little bit closer to the mic?
Well,
it's about physical silver, but what was the question?
Okay, yeah, physical silver. Will we have a substitute for it in the future, like something else instead of silver to use, or will we really need the silver that's really scarce already on this planet? Will we need it, and will it be that valuable soon?
Yeah, silver is very important. It has a lot of healing properties. The ancients knew this as well, and they would combine colloidal silver with monoatomic gold, aurum, and they would make a special drink out of that as well. And even though we feel that silver, gold, and even resources like oil are finite on this planet, they aren't. Now, all the heavier elements are created from exploding stars. So basically, those elements are, to have the gold and silver and onyx and all these other heavier elements all come from an ancient time. But the fact that they're on the planet and in the planet doesn't mean that they're finite, because the elements will also combine at certain times in certain ways during geological pressures to reform more silvers, more gold, more oil. For example, oil is not finite on this planet. There is no such thing as peak oil. It doesn't exist. The earth creates oil. it recreates oil. That's why you can dig a well and then come back in 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden that well that was dry has oil coming up out of it again. That's why we never will run out of gold. The shortage of gold is an illusion to get the prices to go up. Gold will always be formed, diamonds will always be formed, and so will silver. We'll always have silver and a lot of other elements. The earth itself is recreating through geological processes a lot of these elements and bringing them back in itself. And then we mine them and take them out. A lot of the mining companies, they know this, but they keep this information away from the general population. Otherwise, they can't raise the prices.
Thank you very much.
For all of you, what is your favorite story regarding children who you've discovered who had amazing abilities or invented something really cool or had some incredible psychic abilities or whatever? Thanks.
There was a child in India that meditated under a tree for, I think it was close to a year. And it started to make international press. This is without eating or drinking anything as well, by the way. He's living off of sunlight, living off of getting his energy directly from the sun. And he's not the first one to do this. There's another man named Prahlad, who was put into a laboratory over in India, and he hadn't eaten in 60 years or drinking anything as well. He only gets his energy purely from the sun. And this boy had tapped into the same exact technique, and he was meditating under this tree, and reporters came from all over the world to film it live with video cameras and everything else on him. He literally didn't move. I think he ended up doing about 8 months underneath that tree. He was trying to become the next Buddha. But to me, for a child to do that, that was just an amazing feat of consciousness and thrive and everything else. I think that this kid has the potential maybe to be the next Buddha. I mean, he can really raise his consciousness and slow down his metabolic rate, and he literally gets his energy directly from the sun. So it was an amazing story to me.
Well, we have a youth program, so some of you may know, and we, actually Kayla there handles our online program, which we have a lot of remarkable kids from around the world who join and are having some amazing experiences and gifts. But we just did this summer, we did our first kids camp. Our long-term goal is actually to launch K through 12 schools for kids that are much more advanced than what's out there now. But this summer camp was first, the next step in that process. And so we had different teachers there, like Michela, for example, and we had Ken, who's local. He's been a teacher at the Expo before as well. He was teaching telekinesis and such. And now I wasn't there to witness this, but which one of you guys, were you there when the
teenager?
Yeah. So maybe you should tell the rest of that story.
No, I wasn't there. Barb was there.
Oh, Bo, you were there. Okay, you tell the story.
Well, excuse me. I worked with the children, teaching them how to create a crystal circle and the healing benefits of that. And I gave each one of the children a few crystals, tourmaline, for giving them, helping them protect them from negativity, because the world itself. Gifted children, I always had to struggle because I was always different. I never conformed. And gifted children, they don't conform. We never conform. I was the first stage of this non-conformance, and they even tried to put me in camp to try to make me conform, but that didn't happen. But that was getting off the track. But in this camp, this weekend with the gifted children, I taught them how to use their crystals, and we created a circle together, and that was really awesome. I put the rocks out, and we created it together, and each one of us, we had each child go into the circle, and we bonded the crystals to them by all of us using our little wands and walking around the circle 3 times. Now, you've heard about the number 3. Billy Carson was talking about the original number 3. If you're a Christian, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, pagan is Father, Son, Mother, Earth, the sister moon, you know, and whatever. Different religions have different forms of it, but there's something really powerful about the number 3. And so we went around 3 times for each child, and they interacted, and they really enjoyed that. And they did different, they had different things. They learned how to do telekinesis. You know, I was there the first day, and then I had to leave for the second day. So they really did enjoy it, and I could just watch the expansion of their mind with each thing that they learned. And they're all eager to come back. And I've heard other people say, "Oh, I wish I had known. I would have brought my child there." So it's just the first step. I just feel like it's going to blow up and be so wonderful. And it's so nice. I have to tell you, I would have loved to have something like that when I was a child. But we're coming in full circle, coming into waking up. This is our future generation that we've got here. They're going to change the world, and we're just beginning.
Also, there was a girl while Ken was teaching this telekinesis class who, and basically what he does is he puts an object underneath a glass dome, so you can't touch it, but you have to move it without touching it physically. And one of these girls who had never done this before, he was teaching how to do this, and this object was just spinning around underneath this dome really fast. So even she was amazed that this was occurring, and he taught other things like aerokinesis and things like that too. But I thought that was really remarkable that a child just picked that up so quickly without anything more than a few minutes of training. So I mean, there's just amazing things happening, but that's just one of our personal stories of something that was happening right in front of us here, and I'm sure it's not an exclusive thing.
I'm going to do a mom brag moment. But I'm going to use it as an example because I think these kids, they're just coming in, so the veil is so thin that when they just interact with the consciousness of somebody who understands them, it just explodes. So when I first started to channel, very mainstream conventional, my kids were too, I did not tell them I was channeling. I didn't talk about it. I didn't want them to know it because I was deathly afraid that they would be banned from any birthday party in the neighborhood ever again. And so I kept it a secret. But nonetheless, very quickly after I started to do this, I was on a field trip with my oldest daughter. She was in high school at the time. We went to New York, and they took us to the 9/11 memorial. I don't know how many of you have been there, but they dropped us off 6 blocks out from the memorial to walk in because the traffic was so bad. And I could feel the density in those streets. It was overwhelming to me. And we were in a big group, and everyone had their Starbucks and the kids. And I looked over at my daughter, and she looked like she was ready to sob. I mean, the tears were just starting to well in her eyes, and she broke open, and she started to see all the souls in the street. And so she said, "Mom, I just saw somebody. Oh, I saw somebody over there." Well, she saw a woman, this image, this soul entity of a woman sitting on the curb, and she had her hands in her head and her head in her hands, and she said she's crying, and she said right after she saw her, she got the image of a man in one of the buildings running, and he had a bunch of file folders in his hand, and she got a name. And so we got into the memorial, and of course, as we're walking in, I'm hearing it all. She's seeing it all because the souls that pass there are not at all happy with that memorial. I can just tell you right now, they're not happy that the money was spent, and they don't like that it is a barrier. So you have to go through this ticketing process. It's almost like TSA. You walk through the like the whole airport deal, and the souls there are not happy. So she's seeing it. I'm hearing it. We get in, and you can search, the names. And what she told me was this was a couple. They were engaged. And sure enough, we searched the name, and there was a man that had passed in the building who was engaged to a woman and had passed away. So then my second daughter, I go to, both my girls are in theater. I go to this, theater meeting of the parents, and I have this parent come up to me, and she says, "We're so grateful for Alyssa and how she's been connecting to my father who recently passed." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, she knows so much detail about him. And he had this red car, and they put him in a home because he couldn't drive. any longer. They took his license away, but he refused to leave the car because he was married to this red Mustang, and so they parked it right outside of the window of his nursing home. And she knew all about the car and this whole thing, and here she was giving this family, unbeknownst to me, because I had no idea this was going on, messages from their father, grandfather. And she's also amazing with crystals. So this is just a very young age. I started to give her crystals, and one day she was a little bored and acting out, and I said, hey, let's make some crystal grids, let me do you first. And I laid her down, and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not Barb, and I'm just laying crystals on her, and she says, let me try. So I laid down, and she's, carefully arranging these crystals, and I'm laying there, and she puts the last one in, and I went straight out of body. It was like she built a technology around my body where I went, whoosh. I was like, what did you do? She's like, well, I just listened to them. I mean, she knew exactly where to put them. So the point is, I never told them anything about my journey that I was channeling. They knew nothing about metaphysics, but nonetheless, living in that house with me, even though I wasn't preaching it to them, it happened anyway. Yeah.
Hi. This question is also about children. I have a personal relationship with a grandson of mine who has what's called Potocki-Lupski syndrome. It's a duplicate number 17 chromosome. When I did some research on this, I found that there is an increase, and every year more and more and more children are being born with chromosome abnormal numbers or duplicate numbers. And most of these children are what's considered nonverbal. My question is, what is your take on these nonverbal children, and what would their purpose be for multiplying as rapidly as they're coming in? Do you see this as a form of maybe bringing telepathy more prominent than speech? Or I don't know. I just am curious because he's the most beautiful child. Of course, he's my grandchild, but he is so intelligent, but they don't ever see him talking. And there are so many of these children. I just would like to know if you have any, what does this have to do with our conscious awakening, if anything?
I'll start and then I'll pass to whoever's next. But yes, I channel on this a lot, but I also have a personal experience with it because my nephew is very similar. I don't know about the chromosome issue, but he's classified as autistic. And my sister will often tell me these stories. She'll say, he was playing with this truck, those trucks where you pull them back and then all of a sudden they go, and it was on the carpet. And she said, I thought, well, it'd be easier for him to put it on the linoleum floor, but I'm not going to tell him. I'll just see if he figures it out. And he stood up and he looked at her and he said, that's a good idea, Mom. And he walked over and put it on the linoleum floor. So I think that's exactly what's happening. And my channeling clients that come with children like this, the guys will say it all the time. They don't have any reason to be verbal. They're having communications beyond physical.
I just want to add another comment too from the flip side of that the beings that agree to come in and manifest this nonverbal state are also twofold to bring awareness to the conditions that are creating this chromosomal shift when, when reproducing, when, pregnant. The chromosomal shift is getting triggered by things that are being ingested. This is intuitively what I'm getting about it, that it's because of the additives in the food, the pesticides, the other things that we're exposed to that we shouldn't be exposed to. Part of the reason that the numbers are increasing is to bring more consciousness and awareness and more outrage by the general public to demand that our foods are no longer made with poisons and that they're no longer peddled to the general population. What's happening with Monsanto and the way that they've ruined wheat for this country. It's going to come to critical mass, and when there are more and more children that show up with these genetic anomalies that were never present before, then it's going to come into the place where we finally get outraged enough that we stop this type of pollution of our food. And then from the flip side, I see that the beings that magnetize that type of experience here are very evolved and will come in with the ability to telepathically communicate or communicate anyway despite it. So they carry out the mission sort of to bring more heightened awareness to what's happening to our food supply, and at the same time also bring in this higher consciousness.
I just want to make an interesting thing, because every time I think about autism, I think about, I don't know if you follow Catherine Austin Fitts. She's an economist. She worked for HUD. She actually exposed what was happening in the economic system in terms of the whole housing collapse. She blew the whistle on it, and subsequently the government literally went after her. She spent $3 million getting out of lawsuits and just to get her life back. And one of the things she comments on economically in terms of autism is that here you have these two beautiful parents who have an autistic child, 24 hours a day to take care of them. You know, what does that do to your economic system? Not to mention your whole quality of life as a family. And that it's really autism, and what's happened is it's bankrupted so many families economically because both parents have to take care of a child, and maybe they have other children to take care of. So, and it's very interesting, you know, it's not Monsanto anymore, it's Bayer. Bayer owns Monsanto. The German company Bayer, part of the Hitler's Reich, that's who owns Monsanto right now. It's a German-owned company, so they've really taken Monsanto off what we think of, and it's been subsumed by another company, probably now in Germany, so that they don't have to, you know, come up against these patents and lawsuits that's happening. So what's one of the countries in the world that doesn't allow genetically modified products? Do you know which country that is? Pardon me? Russia. So who's the big bugaboo right now to America? Russia. So I think, you know, we have, I think, I have a lot of kids and grandkids. I think children are naturally telepathic. I think that they don't have to be autistic to be telepathic, and all children have these natural innate psychic abilities, as all humans do. And I agree with you. You know, what's it going to take for us to rise up? I don't know if any of you, does anybody here follow Alana Freeland? You know Alana Freeland? Alana Freeland she lives in Oregon. She is the most amazing researcher. I mean, you open her book, it's like one footnote after the next. This woman wakes up in the morning and reads Jane's Aviation. And reads, and seriously, she reads like Air Force patents. I mean, this woman combs through information. Her latest book is about the space fence. You know, folks, we're not just looking at genetically modified crops here. We're looking at the fact that the United States primarily has built a fence of ionized dust and dirt around our planet on purpose. So you go out and you grow your lovely little organic garden in your backyard. And what are they spraying in the clouds? That's going down in your organic food. And it's not just what they're spraying with chemtrails, but now it's, Alana Freeland says, they have a whole system in place. So we have chemtrails. We have HARP that also move the chemtrails. We have CERN that's part of the system. Then we have the satellites. Then we have the sensory attack that's happening with the chemtrails, ionizing our body, making us of a different chemical composition, so that we become part of this space fence. And then we have 5G in our neighborhood. I mean, 5G is so dangerous. Like Caroline Corey said yesterday, it's cell phones on steroids, and they're putting them in schools because schools get paid to have cell phone towers. So when you go home, Google, where's the closest 5G cell phone tower to you? Pick up Alana Freeland, watch her on YouTube. This woman has given us insight into what's happening to our planet in ways that no one else is. So, sorry, that was my soapbox. It's Freeland, F-R-E-E-L-A-N-D, Ilana, E-L-A-N-A, Ilana Freeland. She's got great videos. I mean, and everything is footnoted. That's the scary part of it. I mean, sure, you can say, oh, Ilana doesn't know what she's doing, but Ilana does. There are ships off the coast of California and Oregon and Washington that are spraying chemtrails from ships. It's not just airplanes now. You know, when you travel through America, you see these kind of like white golf ball, great big, they look like enormous golf balls. Have you seen those radar installations? They look like enormous golf balls, big white balls. Those literally move the weather across America. We haven't seen anything. Wait until children are born from parents who live near 5G towers. So that's a bad story I just told you. The good story is part of the mission of the Institute for Exoconsciousness is that we are going to help and collaborate to bring in the technology so that people can protect themselves and can protect their families. They can put grids around their home. They can protect themselves from chemtrails, from 5G towers. We have got to get busy. There's a lot for us to do. It's not going to get any better. It's not going to be magic. And the ETs are here to help us. So.
It reminded me of something, which is to do with protection. I was asking a very good friend of mine, again, another trance medium. It was really hard for her when she was doing all her work originally because it runs in the family. It's a natural gift. And I said to her, well, it must have been pretty sort of mesmerizing when you were first getting into this work because, I mean, as a trance medium, she would be in this room right now. She could see 400 people dressed in period costume because she can. They're appearing at different points in time, walking through this particular point in the land where they used to once be in physical form. And I said it must have been really difficult to sort of live in the physical world in the 20th century and still be able to see people from 5 different centuries, or in case you're in England, 15 different centuries. And she said, well, there's a very good technique for protecting you, not just psychically, but also, you know, in terms of cell towers and 5G, and it's a really good technique. And I went, great, practical stuff. I'm a Taurian. I like practical things, especially if they're half price. It is, isn't it? Yeah. See, I wish they'd teach astrology at an early age. It's so useful. It's like if you ever want a good car mechanic, get a Virgo. Hey, Billy, if you ever want to work on my car, you got a job, man. The only people I trust. And she was saying, there's a very interesting technique you can do to sort of, block out people that are trying to get your attention because, you're a psychic, you can see them. They want you to tell you that you fell off a cliff. Can you please contact my wife and here's the phone number? Because you have to go to sleep as well. You're a human being. You need to regurgitate your system. And but it will apply to cell phone towers, to computers, anything. And she says, what you do, and you can do this any time of the day, but at night it's particularly useful. You basically imagine, and consciously imagine around your body an egg of light. And if you do this every single night and get used to it before you go to bed, just imagine a big egg around you of light. It's a great shape, the egg, because no matter what hits the egg, it goes around it. It moves, keeps moving. It's a natural shape. And she says, in the extreme situations where you feel like you're being psychically attacked, or you have a lot of, you're very sensitive to energy, like 5G, for example, then you imagine not just one layer of white light shaped like an egg around your physical body, do a second layer and a third layer. And the more you do that every day, like driving a car, it becomes second nature. And if you can actually visualize that before you sleep, you basically start being not affected physically by anything around you. I think that's a great piece of advice.
Next question.
Yeah, what, in your guys' opinion, is the most powerful and practical method of reprogramming your subconscious mind?
Reading my book. No. I had to say that. At half price. No. Wait a minute. Security, get rid of this camera and this woman. I think it's to do with going back to what I was saying about the Hopi. Be the change you wish to see. Literally tell yourself and believe in something. And literally, sincerely believe in it. That immediately changes everything within your system. You don't have to sort of read tons of books or go to tons of conferences. Of course, I didn't say that. But if you believe enough in an idea, that in itself becomes a program within your subconscious. And the more you start giving it attention to that idea, the more it becomes a physical reality within your consciousness and your DNA. And then you become that idea. It's not that difficult. It just takes practice.
I would just add to that and say present moment awareness and focus is really the only way to quiet the noise sometimes too, because if we're worried about what's happened in the past or what might happen in the future, and the stories and the programming that we've already received, the only way to really get around that is just to focus in on exactly what's happening to you right here, right now, in this moment. Over and over again, now moment, now moment, now moment. Step into it over and over and over again and see what shows up and see how you can witness yourself from that place. Because inside of that now moment is the place where you can truly experience yourself in your truth, outside of all the programming, outside of anything you've ever been told. And witness yourself and experience yourself from that place. And that's what the ancients have been teaching. Tully's made a whole career out of it, right? But it's true. It's so simple, but it's so true, and it works.
One of the really valuable things that the guides teach often is that when we're running negative patterns or things that we want to change that are embedded in our subconscious, whether it's an addiction or something like that, sometimes we have too much resistance around it to really change it. So we'll really dive into the pattern. And like, for example, smoking is a really perfect one. A lot of times people come to me and say, you know, I'm smoking and I can't stop smoking. And I've tried this, I've tried that, I'm going to try this next week. And everything that you're trying is actually focusing currency on the pattern. And the best thing to do is to actually bring new patterns into your life. So being really neutral with the smoking for a while and just bringing new things into your life that are really exciting to you can change your vibration in such a way that those patterns become easily replaced. So the things that don't match your frequency anymore will easily fall away when those new patterns become the norm.
Some of the things that I tell people with regards to this question is to start off with changing your diet because you have to take care of your gut. I recommend a plant-based diet. I'm not saying you have to go plant-based 100%, but definitely increase your vegetable and fruit intake and herb intake, and reduce your meat intake if you possibly can, because that way you will really start to see a little bit of a difference almost immediately in your consciousness, the way it raises. Also, steer away from a lot of electronics. Try to reduce your exposure to TV. I have TVs, and I literally don't really watch them. To be honest with you, I don't have cable. I cut off cable TV years ago, save myself a couple $100 a month. I have streaming internet, so if I want to watch something, I'll turn on Gaia or I'll turn on a Netflix every now and then. For the most part, I just spend my time reading and studying and researching. But that doesn't mean you have to cut out TV completely. I'm just saying reduce your exposure to TV, because TV will reprogram you over and over again. That's why they call it programming. It'll give you the negative program. You got to try to step away from that. Try not to sleep with your cell phone in your bed and by your head and next on your table and all that. Turn them off at night. Turn off the phone at night. And also, I highly recommend meditation, preferably twice a day. Meditate in the morning, meditate in the evening, or whatever times are more convenient for you. And there's an old saying that goes, if you're too busy to meditate for 30 minutes, then you should sit for an hour. Highly recommend meditation. And then also you don't have to read a million books, but you find a self-help book, a book about your, digging into the inner self, just as they've all said on this panel. I have a song called Inner Space. And you have to take a journey to inner space to truly raise your consciousness. In order to grow on the outside, you got to grow on the inside first, and there's no way to escape that. Everything else on the outside is an illusion. Like, you're going to keep hearing me say that. People who are looking for salvation externally will never find it. You will never find a salvation externally. You have to look within. So those are my recommendations.
This question is for Ethann. So ever since I sat in that 2-hour session listening to you share about numerology and astrology, I immediately went to the Caballerians and put in all my information. And I wasn't too surprised with what I found. And I will be changing my name. And but I want to know, why doesn't free will override that? Like, I have worked hard to be the person that I am, even knowing, because I've always known, like, I have done my numerology, I was brought up with metaphysics, astrology was always, like, every new boyfriend that came into my life, we ran their chart, and so, like, I've known a lot of this stuff all my life, and I just felt like if I kept trying and being a good person and, rising above what those numbers added up to, then, my vibration would elevate and I would exceed, but it's been a whole lot of work. And looking ahead, it's not going to get any better based on this current name. So why doesn't free will allow me, to work beyond that?
Well, free will is going to allow you to. So let's look at the name as sort of the how you go about your life. Free will is going to help determine. Well, when you come into this reality, to live inside of a certain sort of perspective. So we choose this life. So, for example, I might have chosen to do what I'm doing right now at this time. And so to some extent, as souls, when we incarnate into this reality, we've already thought through the journey that we wanted to go through, for the most part, and the kinds of things we want to experience, the people we want to meet along the way. To a great extent, that is something that we've already decided on so that we can have certain experiences. So the idea of free will, I think a lot of people have a misperception about that. It isn't that our egoic selves in our human bodies can change anything, because we may have chosen to experience certain things from our broader perspective, our broader understanding, that our human egoic selves can't comprehend once we're here, because we forget. So from that standpoint, the free will that we have, though, is how to live inside of that perspective of the life that we came here to experience. So you might have chosen to meet certain people, have certain relationships along the way. Those people are still going to interact with you in your life. But the free will that you have allows you to decide how to have those experiences. And so we always have to consider free will from that perspective. And now the name is, think of the name as, if you're having, say, a headache, you may use certain essential oils. Or if you are in a bad mood, maybe you'll play a certain kind of music which picks you up and makes you feel happier and more positive. Well, you have the free will to do that, right? So you have the free will to change your mood at any time you want by choosing different things. perhaps a different diet. Maybe you feel a little less healthy, or your attitude is more pessimistic, and you change your diet. And I do find that a lot. People who change their diets to more raw organic or live foods tend to become more conscious and more positive, more optimistic. So those are free will choices you can make. See, the name you have is the same way. Foods and your environment and essential oils are all vibrational. But those are things that are vibrational that you may put on for a day, or if it's diet, it may be more permanent. Your name is something that is more long-term, permanent. Now, when you're born into this reality, you chose a particular name. Your parents gave it to you, but really you chose to have that name. And your parents just provided it for you. And as a soul, you chose to have that name to give yourself a certain sort of an experience up to a certain point in your life. But, maybe, as a woman, maybe at a certain point you get married and your name changes because you take your husband's last name. And it's sort of like putting on a new essential oil without intending to, because you didn't know the repercussions of doing that. And that gives you another version of your human experience. So you lived up to that point with a certain vibration, certain human experience, and now changing your name is sort of like being reborn without actually leaving your physical body. So now you've lived up to a certain point in this human experience, and you have an opportunity to live an entirely different human experience from a different perspective because of that name. Now, for those who intentionally change their names to adjust their numerology, it's the same thing. So it's, you have the free will to change your name anytime. So it's not the absence of free will, but look at it from another perspective. The name is not, when a person changes their name, it's not just that they change their name and therefore their life changed. And so you're sort of, at a disadvantage because of whatever name you think you have and the repercussions of that. But think of it as when your consciousness changes and when you change timelines and become a different person, your name naturally will change. So let's say you do decide to change it, like you said you are.
Change it.
Well, it didn't. Your life that will change as a result of changing the name is not really because you changed your name. It's because at this time you were always going to take a different path. And therefore you found yourself in this audience and you heard me say those things, and you're going to change your name, not because the name change is going to alter your life, but because by your own multidimensional understanding of where you would be at this point in your life, you knew you were going to choose a different path. And that path couldn't resonate with the name that you've had up to this point. So it's really not that you don't have free will, we all do. But people who change their names, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to something different, they had that unconscious awareness that at that point in their life, they were going to take a different path.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it takes it right back around to having free will to change it.
Yes.
Not just working so hard.
Right. And you could choose not to change it right now, right?
Oh, no.
And if you chose not to change it, that's not a right or wrong. And any name you have will give you certain qualities in your life. But nothing in your life requires suffering. There are challenges to any numerology. There are positives and negatives. It just so happens that certain combinations are more positive than others, but there are always challenges and there's always benefits. But even in the most challenging names, there are individuals who thrive and there are individuals who suffer. So, and that is a factor of consciousness, not so much numerology. So it's a much more complex thing, but changing your name gives you the power to alter your path in a way that's really quite simple without any effort. So
it would be a nice change.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I have a two-part questions. I have been coming across with more and more people claiming and individuals offering Breathanian workshops living without food and water, and just depending purely on breath, air as a form of energy. So how realistic is that in our humanity heading that direction? And my second question is, how necessary or important is it to become a vegetarian or vegan through this process? And as a curiosity, I'd like to ask our panel, if you don't mind, by a raise of hand, how many of you are either vegan or vegetarian? Okay, about half. Thank you.
Well, anybody want to take that first? So now I'm not a breatharian, but I did practice sun gazing for quite a few years, and it's essentially the same sort of outcome. It was quite a while ago. I say it's my former life because it's before I went on this journey. I brought a sun gazer, a famous sun gazer from India, to Michigan actually to speak because I was curious about the subject, and this man had at that point not eaten or drank anything for 7.5 years. So I brought him here because I was curious. He stayed at my house, and he didn't eat or drink anything for the entire week he was with me, which, you know, that's not that incredible, of course, but nonetheless, he did do that. But what I noticed was his personality was very unique. He was just in this constant state of neutrality. And he would just sit there, wouldn't say anything, was completely calm. And even we arranged talks for him throughout Michigan at different places, and he would just sit there in his chair, not interacting, engaging, just in this state of neutrality. And I was a little concerned, is this guy going to be able to speak in front of an audience? But he got up there and he was the most powerful speaker. So what I noticed about him was he had this power of presence about him that was really quite incredible. At that time, I'd never seen in anybody else. But anyway, so I learned sun gazing practice from him, and for about 2.5 years, I was sun gazing for a couple of hours a day. And supposedly, sun gazing, the idea, or what's taught is, if you can sun gaze for 9 months for 45 minutes per day, then you don't have to do it again, and your body's physiology changes to where you no longer require food or water. And you know, I never really cared much for food anyway. Even as a child, I would try to give my food to my brother while my mom wasn't looking, or stash food at school so I didn't have to eat it. So I never really had much of an affinity to it, but I can tell you that I don't really have that much of a desire for food, and I think that whether sun gazing altered my physiology or not, I do believe that if I had to not have anything tomorrow, I'd be perfectly fine. And I know a lot of back when I was in that conversation, there were a lot of sun gazers who were not eating very much or had given up food. So, you know, my perspective is, and the idea of should you become vegan or vegetarian, is that required for higher consciousness? I don't think that we can make that decision for other people. But I think what I've observed, though, is when a person becomes more conscious, food actually gives them up more, and meat gives them up. It's not that you have to force yourself to give up meat or give up food. As you evolve, it will just give you up. You will just lose a taste for it and an interest for it, and may even be repulsed by the idea of eating it. So I think breatharianism is great, and I think sun gazing is great. These are all things at one time that people did on a more mass scale, and I think in the distant past, people didn't eat food. And I think in the distant future, we won't eat food. And the movement toward vegetarianism and veganism that's becoming so popular, I mean, Michigan has a whole bunch of vegan restaurants, which 10 years ago we had none. So it's clearly a movement, and I think it's a sign that we are heading toward a higher consciousness world because more and more people desire that. Not because they're trying to force themselves to, but because they just desire that type of a lifestyle and dietary preference. And things like breatharianism and sun gazing are becoming more popular again because we're moving in that direction. So I do think in our lifetimes, that's going to become more popular. More and more people are going to become vegetarian and vegan, and we're probably going to see the beginnings of a significant amount of our population will stop eating food. I think that's very realistic. But I don't think it's something we should force or impose or judge others for, because we're all at different places on our journey, and you can't force that sort of a decision. It's something that each person will reach on their own, in their own journey. Anyone else want to?
Yeah, you pretty much said everything I was going to say, except for the fact that, we wouldn't have all of this breatharianism stuff on the planet if we weren't the beings that could support it, right? It's just like alternative health showing up to take over the mainstream medical. It's just, we manifest these things and we match the frequency of them. But yeah, I kind of raised my hand because I eat vegan 99% of the time, but sometimes my body tells me I need a piece of fish. I don't eat meat anymore, but sometimes I have a piece of fish. And I think it's important that, again, like what Ethan was saying, I didn't choose to be vegan. Veganism chose me because I started to channel, and everything in my world just adapted to that new frequency. But everything that we come in contact with is a consciousness, and that is information. Right? So when we are bringing breath into our body, that's more information. When we're eating a plant, that's information. When we're eating an animal, that's information. And that becomes integrated with us. So when the natives revered the animals that they consumed, it was a different type of vibration that they were consuming than the information that we're taking in today. So it's something to consider, but the guides are quick to say that not unlike the pattern of smoking, if you're going to force yourself to do something that you're not ready to do or you don't want to do, you're just going to create resistance around it, and then you're just going to lower your vibration. Because I have a great example. And when I first started, when I was channeling, I thought I needed to take a class because I needed to learn what I was doing. And so I went to this channeling class, and the first thing this teacher said was, you cannot eat any sugar or drink any alcohol, because if you do and you channel, you are going to be affecting everyone else in this class, because alcohol and sugar are low vibration. And I was scared half to death because at that time in my life, I still had those things in my life. And so it took every bit of me to not consume sugar and alcohol, and I was monitoring my diet, and I just became so miserable. And then sometimes I'd forget, and I'd show up in class and I'd think, oh my gosh, I'm ruining everybody right now, and that's the kind of thinking you don't want to get into. So I think that you really have to listen to your body and go with what makes you happy first. And if you're on that path, you're naturally going to gravitate to the things that are best for you anyway.
I'd like to ask you guys about some practical tips about living in 3D world, 3D life, like everyday life. Like myself, sometimes I feel like I'm living double life. So one life is the life of, I would say, 5D maybe, I don't know. When I'm researching, when I'm learning, when I'm listening to you as well, like YouTube, reading. So this gives me oxygen. This is my air, and I just feel great when I'm doing this. But there is a second part of my life when I'm going to work. I'm working with a lot of people, and actually I cannot even talk to them about what my interest. I know it would be like totally weird for them. I have only few people who I can talk to them, and this is for me like breath, these conversations. So I don't feel good in this double life living. Even my family, like my mom is Catholic, is very strong Catholic. Even if I told her about this conference that I went to, but I didn't tell her the details. She already somehow intuitively knew what is this. So she was keeping asking me, what kind of conference is this? But I still didn't want to give her some details. So she finally said, this must be some kind of sect. So I start to laugh because she has this intuition and this, I don't know, the more I don't tell her stuff, the more she is into questioning me. And I know that she couldn't bear this kind of information. She's too much into Catholic, like Orthodox Catholic. And it's heavy for me sometimes. Heavy because I feel like I have to control myself in some situations. And yeah. So what is your intake?
So how do we live in the 3D in a 5D way? Is that what your question?
Yeah. How you deal with people who are not into those kind of things, and you have to deal with them. You have to talk, small talk, or all those kind of stuff.
First, you're not alone. Everybody is in your shoes right now. And I think we all, first of all, I don't think 3D is bad. It's just where we were. And in many ways, it's a bridge to a new reality. So a lot of us are finding ourselves in jobs that we don't like anymore because we've already become the new identity, but we haven't started the path or the road where that identity expresses itself. Like the guys will always say, uncomfortable comes because we've already created a non-physical timeline that hasn't manifested in physical that we are aware of to such a degree that it causes that uncomfortable. But I mean, my journey, I've had the same situation, going from very conventional mindset, and my family is still, grew up Catholic. My dad's still very Catholic. And I understand what you're saying because a part of you doesn't come to the family dinner, right? You show up, but not all of you is there, and that's why it feels so bad. But, what I've, I guess, come to in this is that it's all about energy, really, because the more currency you put into where you're going and become really neutral with the stuff that's not going with you, the more the right things tend to happen. It's just like my kids, me not telling them, but nonetheless them awakening to their own gifts. And I've seen that in my own family. Where I used to force the issue, or I used to tiptoe around the issue. Now I just show up as myself. I'm not going to start talking to them about extraterrestrials because I know that doesn't make them comfortable, but nonetheless, all of a sudden, I see them having these conversations, right? So we're bridging realities right now. And a lot of those realities are going to change gradually, and this shift isn't comfortable, right? So I guess my best advice to you, and something that the guides are talking about a lot in this grid shift, is neutrality. And neutrality isn't not feeling. It's actually being so aware of how you feel in the present moment that you're allowing that to be the impetus for where you're going next. So we have to be careful that we're not putting too much currency in the stuff that's falling away to the degree that we're holding on in resistance, and we allow that path to change for us. And look where you are. Would you be here if you weren't already magnetizing that new tribe? And that's kind of what happened to me. My family is still my family. I still love them. Your conversations I can't have with them, but I manifested this whole family here. I mean, it's amazing to me. Like, I have a family bigger than my blood family now. And that's the way it works. And I think that's really the microcosm of the macrocosm, right? It's all where we're going. We're not in these little, individual timelines. We're merging back into this one reality. So it's a process.
I was definitely dealing with this as well as we all are and we all have. And really, I looked at it as an opportunity. Every time I went to work and I was being judged by people that were more powerful than me, I saw it as an opportunity to grow because I'd already achieved a certain level of understanding of myself and understanding that really didn't even matter what they thought of me. So it was an opportunity for me to really experiment and play and be the person that I really wanted to be, because I was finally free, knowing that I'm going to this 5D world. I know I'm going there, and I'm going to get there. And so right now, I'm still kind of stuck in the 3D one. So let's have a little bit of fun with it.
That's true. I mean, I had to fly all the way from Maine to come and talk to people that don't think I'm mad. Okay? Sometimes you have to do things in a desperate way. I disenfranchised my own parents a few months ago because the negativity that was going my way. And I told them, I said, unless you stop this behavior, I'm going to stop talking to you. This is my life. I don't want to have this burden of guilt, of judgment. And, you know, some people say, oh, that's bad, you know, bad to your parents. No, I'm just being kind to myself. I'm just showing that I'm going to put up a limit as to what I will put up with. And I'm trying to show that I've become a different person. I'm a very different person from almost 20 years ago. You could not get me in a room in front of people and speak. I was in advertising, which is a notoriously, I could have lots of adjectives for this one. It's just a notorious business. You know, I could not get in front of people, very shy. I don't like the limelight. I don't like it now, but it's something I do because like you were saying, you sort of fall into this new you, this new paradigm, but you have to accept that there's going to be some challenges. There will be chaos. Your friends will disappear. I lost my wife. I lost my house. I lost most of my friends from school when I started writing a book on crop circles. They thought I was away with the fairies. And I said, I am away with the fairies. They're real. And you know what? You know, but I thought, you know, the fringe benefits have been so wonderful. I have been levitated in a crop circle. I have crossed into the other world several times. I've met people. I've seen people coming out of the stones in pyramids. And you think after a while, maybe I am mad, but other people have done it too. But you suddenly realize that in that moment, you are actually experiencing something so extraordinary that nobody else has done, that it gives you power. It's a bit of an adrenaline kick. You get a bit, you know, it's like, this is really good for the ego. And this is why I drink a lot as well. It really helps. I'm sorry about you vegans. I don't agree with the whole. I'm a serious meat eater and hellraiser. I play rock and roll very loud, not very new age at all. But that's me. That's my energy. I have to burn a lot of energy in order to leave a spot so I can bring more stuff in. The stuff that I do every day, working with sacred sites, it's about manipulating energy. I go to these places, I suck this stuff up, and it drains me. I go to Machu Picchu, I go to Sacsayhuaman, I am drained because you're literally putting your head inside a big energy complex. So for me, I have to find the tools to survive every day, and that's my advice. You've got to find the tools. If you engage on this journey, you've got to find and do what is necessary to survive. And that means changing your friends, joining special groups that feel the way you do. But it will be an uncomfortable period, but I can assure you, talking from personal experience, that the fringe benefits are amazing. They really, really are, but there will be that uncomfortable moment. So you might as well accept it. Okay, acceptance is the key to everything. You may not believe it, but if you can just accept it, you've already made 50% of progress over that bridge. In fact, actually, Elton John wrote a great song. Actually, Bernie Taupin wrote the lyrics to the song. And Bernie Taupin is a great genius. If you haven't read his lyrics, you've missed out on something. And there's a song called The Bridge, and it said, do you cross the bridge or do you fade away? And it gets me every single time, that thing, because it's so absolutely true. You know, you've got one chance here in this lifetime. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to make chicken salad of it or chicken shit? I want to make chicken salad of it. And you accept that, the consequences that come with that. There will be changes, there will be challenges, but you will be much better at the end of it. Just have to accept there's going to be a little bit of a trial and error period while you get there, but once you get there, oh, it's plain sailing. It really is. I wouldn't swap it for anything else. I really wouldn't.
We have to wrap things up, but I want to just comment quickly on that. My approach to any problem in life, and I think it's a good suggestion for all of you to consider, is if you have a problem such as what you're sharing, create something in your life such that by its existence, the original problem becomes non-existent. So, for example, my life these days, this is my life. All of you are the people in my world. I don't really exist very much in a universe where there are those who don't understand these ideas. So by creating that, I've pretty much done away with that situation. Now, occasionally I have to visit the Secretary of State and, go to conventional stores once in a while, which I rarely do. Which for me, because I so rarely do those things, it's like I got off a spaceship and I'm visiting another planet. But it's a very rare thing because I've created a life for myself such that that problem doesn't really exist for me. So I would suggest that you consider doing that. Create a life such that the thing that you're concerned about cannot coexist in that life. So anyway, we've come to the end of our program and our 6th Expo. I hope you'll join us again next year in August. And it's been a pleasure serving all of you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Awake and Empowered TV with our special video from our 2018 Awake and Empowered Expo. Join me next week as we speak with another incredible individual who's standing on leading edge and changing the world.